Morning, everybody. Thanks very much for having me here this morning. So, I'm Rob Diver. I'm the head of performance at Integrity QHSE, which is Scotland's top performing QHSE consultancy. Part of my portfolio within the company is I'm responsible for risk and resilience. In addition to what I do there in my background, I'm also part of a team of international SMEs that work for NATO at the Joint Warfare Centre in Stavanger. And what we do there is help NATO understand about emerging threats. So NATO is very good as an alliance in what it does. So 32 nations have come together, brought all their expertise, all their military together to combat threats to the West, basically. But what they've realized over the last decade is that conflict has changed, and that now conventional conflict is something that we don't see that much, but unconventional conflict is. So it's realized quite quickly that what it needs to better understand is unconventional warfare. And it needs to understand about energy, which plays a pivotal role in that, geopolitics, emerging continents, finance, investments, supply chains. So I go out there 5 times a year to better understand, help them better understand these threats, but also to bring that back to industry to try and help industry to better understand that as well. So this morning, we're just going to give a very brief input on this term, hybrid warfare, and specifically how it affects North Sea and offshore operations, and looking at those emerging threats to maritime traffic and offshore infrastructure. So when we speak about hybrid warfare, we need to understand what it is. So unfortunately for us, it's probably in the last 2 years that we've realized that there is this emerging threat. Unfortunately for us, our adversaries have been targeting us for 10 years with this. So there's been sustained campaigns against us around this. We're a little bit late catching up onto this. Our Nordic partners and Baltic partners, which are a little bit more front-facing to the threat from us, are light years ahead of us with this. So they've developed resilience around this, and we really are on catch-up on this. But the term hybrid warfare is basically looking at unconventional warfare and how it affects us. So conventional warfare, really to understand. So Russia launches a ballistic missile at London this afternoon. The conventional response is we launch one back, and we're involved in a conventional conflict. What's going on in Ukraine at the moment is conventional conflict. When we look at Iran and the Middle East, conventional conflict. We're looking at tanks, we're looking at ships, we're looking at aircraft, we're looking at bombs. It's all that conventional piece for us. The unconventional side is this hybrid warfare piece where, so as I said, if a ballistic missile lands in London, we know the conventional response. What do we do as a nation, though, if our NHS is targeted by a sustained cyber attack which disables our entire NHS system? What do we do? What's the conventional response for this country? We don't have one. We don't have a conventional response. We might get really cross about it. We might expel a few diplomats over it if we can prove who did it, but there's no conventional response around it, okay? But there's a massive impact on the economy, on the trust in central government, on social discord, the public's understanding of it, so it's hugely impactful. But what it does is it remains below the threshold of conventional response. So it's all the things that happen that we don't have a conventional response for. To put it in some perspective, if the war in Ukraine and the war in Iran were a forest fire, hybrid warfare is global warming. That's the scale that it's on. And it affects everybody in this room. It affects you onshore and it affects you offshore. In your space, in the maritime space, it often looks routine until it doesn't. So something happens which you think, that just doesn't feel right, but I'm not quite sure why it doesn't feel right. And probably more importantly, I'm not quite sure what we can actually do about it. We probably haven't got a process or a plan to deal with that because we weren't really expecting it to happen. The typical signs of hybrid warfare that we'll see in the offshore environment are things like surveillance, vessels, loitering of vessels, and unusual vessel behavior. So in July 2022, President Putin changed the Russian naval doctrine. He amended it quite dramatically. And what he said was, any Russian vessel anywhere in the world is compelled to undertake espionage and intelligence gathering activities for the Russian state. But he didn't just go as far as that. He basically took most of those vessels back and made sure that he equipped them with autonomous vehicles, the use of drones, intelligence gathering activity, the capabilities to conduct cyber activity offshore. So he equipped these vessels to make sure that when they do get into these spaces, they can carry out that unconventional warfare piece. And the purpose of hybrid warfare is it's to test response. It's not about the conventional attack piece that we look for. So a payloaded drone with an explosive hits a platform, it's a conventional act. A drone that comes within the exclusion zone of a platform and just sits there is unconventional. What's it doing? Why is it there? What's our response? What are we going to do? And usually your offshore teams will feel it before they can define it. They'll see something and think that's not right, but they won't be quite sure what it is. So the whole thing with hybrid warfare is it creates that uncertainty, but it's the unconventional piece. It's not the conventional security situations that we typically expect to see. So what's the threat picture for the North Sea? The North Sea is a critical operating space. So when I go over to Stavanger in Norway, Joint Warfare Centre with NATO, when all the countries come together, I can't tell you how highly they think of the North Sea, how critical it is to not only NATO, but to NATO security operations. So it's a critical maritime space. The threat's just not the direct attack piece, but sustained hybrid activity. We're not looking for one-off events that do occur. We're looking for sustained activity. So the sustained presence of vessels, the sustained presence of drones, sustained cyber incidents. But it's not just that activity we can see, it's the whole piece that we can't see. How as a nation, how as an organization do you manage that? How do you manage the information space around that? So we see Russian warships in the English Channel. How do we manage that space in the news? So typically the news sensationalize that narrative so that half the public think we're being invaded by Russia. How do we as organizations manage that space? So Russia's been involved in a sustained campaign of disinformation against our renewables transition for the last 10 years. For the last 10 years, they have done everything they can to undermine it, to ensure that we remain reliant on hydrocarbons, because we're still buying refined Russian oil. So everything you see in the press around our transition to renewables and the effectiveness of that and the performance of that, look beyond that and look what's undermining that, what narratives are pushing that. And the main objective of it is, particularly for the North Sea, is to test our response. So how do we respond? So a Russian surveillance vessel that we know is an intelligence gathering vessel, is a military vessel, has a military capability, suddenly starts to go within exclusion zones around our platforms. What does the UK do? How do we respond to it? What's the conventional response? It's really difficult to manage. So how do they manage that space? Do they launch some Poseidon aircraft to monitor it? Do we surface our sub next to it? Do we shut down operations on a platform? It's all the time looking at how does the UK, how does the industry respond to this? But more importantly, how does the industry manage the information space around it? If we surface, which we have done recently, a nuclear sub next to a Russian vessel, it's a big deal. It's a massive deal. It's a massive show of strength. So for us, how are we continually managing that space? The threat picture for us is the importance of resilience. So how do we build that resilience to this? How do we report it? And how do we communicate across the entire sector to make sure that everybody understands it? Because what we do in that space is as important as any physical security steps that we take. So we can surface subs and we can fly aircraft and we can put jets and Type 26 frigates up. That's great all day long. But if people don't understand the threat and they don't know what to look for, then it has limited impact. So the North Sea, why is it such a big deal? You know, a lot of people I speak to in Aberdeen just say, well, Aberdeen's just a little grey city, a couple of 100,000 people, and we're a little bit of the North Sea, and we don't do much, we're in decline, transition's the next big thing. Don't underestimate, the North Sea is the crown jewels of UK energy. It has been for 50 years, and it will continue to be so. We will always have to rely on it to a degree. But it builds our economic resilience. So hybrid warfare isn't about targeting offshore installations. It's about affecting the economy around it, which then dampens our economic resilience. That has a knock-on effect to the entire country and to the entire part of Europe that we're sat in. It's critical to NATO's northern flank where it sits. It's absolutely critical to protect that northern flank. If the Russian northern fleet was to ever get into direct conflict with the US, it would need to transit through that gap to get there. So it's critical, absolutely critical where we are. Its close proximity to the GI-UK gap adds to its strategic importance. So that's the Greenland ice and UK gap. During the Cold War, it was the most surveilled maritime stretch in the world. To this day, it's still that important. It's absolutely critical. The Russian subs that come through, travel through there to get into the Atlantic. It's absolutely a critical stretch of water. It's so important to the NATO alliance that that is protected. What we've seen over the last 2 decades as well is this increased activity in the Arctic. So while NATO in the West has been very much focused on the East with Ukraine, and that's from 2014, from the invasion of Crimea and moving onwards, what we've seen is China and Russia increase their presence in the Arctic massively. And this is all to support things like the Yamal Peninsula, where Russia has about 150 years of hydrocarbons just waiting to be purchased, okay? So everything we think we're doing around sanctions, they're ready and they're ahead of the game with it. But what it's identified is that Russia is looking to claw back sovereignty in the Arctic. It wants to, Putin is obsessed with reinstating his presence, Russia's presence in the Arctic. China is looking at it from an economic perspective. And if it can establish the Northern Sea Route, this alternative shipping lane through the Arctic, then it takes away the importance of things like the Straits of Hormuz, that we've seen now how critical that's been. And anyone that honestly thinks that the war in Iran is about the people of Iran and about stabilizing the country, my own perspective is it isn't. It's about controlling the Straits, okay? The Straits are China's gateway to take oil and gas from the Middle East to where it needs to go. Whoever controls that controls energy supply, and we've seen that. So that's why it's so critical. That Arctic piece has got so big now. That's why we looked recently when we saw President Trump looking to say, I want Greenland, okay? It wasn't about just the viability of what's in Greenland. It's the strategic importance of where it is. The West is on catch-up in the Arctic. We're so far behind of where China and Russia are. And because of that, tension in the Arctic is increasing the strategic importance of the North Sea. So we're the gateway. The GI-UK gap, where we are, is the gateway, and that's why it's so important. And that's why, for our adversaries, to disrupt activities in the North Sea is so critical to them. So you as operators, what's it going to look like? What's hybrid warfare? It's fine me standing here saying, oh, these cyber attacks and these suspicious vessels and everything else and trying to, what actually will it look like? What do your people need to look out for? You'll see unusual behavior at sea, but not necessarily hostile action, okay? Think about and look at it and think, how many instances have we seen of direct attacks on any infrastructure or vessels at sea? We haven't seen any, because we're in the hybrid space. We're not looking for conventional responses. If a Russian warship suddenly targeted one of our vessels, there would be a conventional response. If a Russian intelligence gathering vessel just shadows a platform and suddenly starts traversing across critical pipeline infrastructure, what's the conventional response? We'd probably get really annoyed about it. We'd probably speak about it in the press, but what do we do? So the government looks at the industry and says, well, what are you going to do? And the industry, quite right, looks back and says, well, what do you want us to do? We don't really understand what the threat is. No one's really told us what the threat is. You'll see close approaches, loitering of vessels, AIS irregularities, and poor compliance. Deliberate acts to elicit a response from you. How do you respond to this? So is there a cohesive response across the industry? Do individual operators do it differently? Do individual vessels do it differently? Do individual captains do it differently? That's what they're looking for all the time. They're measuring response on how we respond to incidents all the time. Suspicious drones, unusual lights, repeated odd behavior, may be the clearest warning signs, okay? So we know that under the change in the Russian naval doctrine, that there are drones aboard these vessels. We've seen it. If you're 4 miles out at sea and there's a drone near your platform, it isn't shot bought. It's not being flown from on shore. It's come from a vessel. It's a deliberate act. That drone's not there to observe the platform. It's not there to create disruption for the platform. It's not there to target the platform. It's there to see what your response is. At what point do you say that drone is close enough for us to suspend operations? What are the economic and financial implications of suspending operations on a North Sea platform or a vessel? What's the knock-on effect in the media space around that? How do we manage that? What is the government signaling around that? How does the industry read that? And how do the public read that? So from one drone, cheap little drone, flown close to a platform, we've suddenly got an issue that's having an international effect on the industry and the country. That's hybrid warfare. The consequences that they're trying to create are confusion. What do we do? How do we do it? Who do we speak to? Who do we ring up? Who gives us guidance on this? Is it Police Scotland? Do we ring NATO? Do we ring Maritime headquarters? Who do we do? What do we speak to? What's the threshold? Distraction and increased collision or operating risk to create risk for us. So by their actions, it's almost posturing. If I do this, what will you do? Will you do something that's out of the norm for you? Will it create an additional risk for you as an operator, as you as a vessel captain? The big thing for you is the fact that it will become a marine safety problem before it becomes a wider security problem. You're the threshold. So the decisions that you make on escalation and what you do will decide whether it becomes a broader security problem for the country or whether it remains something that's managed locally in the North Sea. So totally unfairly, the emphasis is pushed onto you. And I'm sure you've had situations now where people have rung ashore and said, what do we do? Who do we speak to? Or you've sought advice and people have said, well, it's not actually doing anything. I'm not quite sure how we respond. And that's the big issue that we've got. So when we're thinking about responses, for you, what does good look like? What should we be doing as an industry? That early reporting of unusual behavior, safety zone issues, and suspicious activity is absolutely critical. So the earlier you report it, the more that organizations can start to coordinate it. What are the peak times for this? What's the activity around certain vessels? Is it around operations? Is it around weather? Is it around the political climate? We've got elections coming up. What you will see in future elections is increased activity around those periods to create the whole distrust in central government piece. Government's totally incompetent, can't handle this. It's about exploiting that whole space as part of activity that could always just stem from the North Sea. Clear watch-keeping, identification, escalation, and evidence capture routines. You've got to get it right across the entire sector. There's got to be cohesion and alignment in how you respond to this. Watchkeepers have got to know exactly what they're looking out for. What do they need to record? What do they need to identify? When do they escalate it? There needs to be cohesion and alignment in when we escalate. We don't want one company making 50 phone calls and one who says, for us, it wasn't a big deal. We had that brief on hybrid warfare. It's not a big deal for us. Evidence capture to capture routines. So we look for behavior around vessels, around activity. It's not for us to gather that evidence and then to look at it, to assimilate what the quality of it is and what we do with it. It's for us to find it, package it, and give it to somebody to say, this is what we've seen. Screenshots, tracks, timings, positions of photographs, it's all evidence. It's all things that we need to start to collate activity. So for a while we had, and there have been multiple incidents of drones offshore, and we've looked at it and we've dealt with them in isolation. What we need to do is look and say, what's the patterns around this activity? When does it occur? What are the critical optimum times? Why are they critical optimum times? That's an analyst's job. Our job is to provide that evidence, to collate it and put it forward. The overall aim of that is we're supporting safety. Ultimately, hybrid warfare will have an impact on safety on any of the vessels or platforms that you're on. It will have an impact on safety on the beach. How do you respond to something? If you over-respond or you under-respond, is there a safety implication? If goodwill and intention on a platform means somebody acts in a particular way, is that likely to undermine safety on a vessel or a platform? Without that cohesion and clear processes that you have, you're increasing that risk to you, to operations, to personnel, and to your business continuity all the time. We need that decision-making without fueling unnecessary alarm. We need to understand that the entire objective of hybrid warfare is not to get into conventional warfare. It's to stay below the threshold of conventional response. It's to push it to government, to the police, to the Coast Guard, to NATO to say, what do we do? And somebody says, we're in that grey area. And you'll hear it referred to as this, the grey zone, that whole area where it's not really a policey matter. It's not really a forces matter. The Coast Guard will take note of it. And suddenly we're stuck right in the middle as the industry saying, yeah, somebody point us in the right direction here. What do we do? The reason you're targeted is because of the critical nature of what you do. When I go over to NATO, I can't tell you how much they talk about energy. They talk about renewables. They talk about hydrocarbons and say, that is critical to global security. Everything that you do, trust me, is in the absolute higher echelons of international security because it's pivotal, because you affect economies, you affect markets. We've seen geopolitical shocks from what's going on in Iran and the massive impacts that it's had on resilience, on our own energy resilience and stability in this country. That's the whole design of it, and we sit right at the center of it. What will the future look like? There's going to be increased activity, okay? It's going to get worse. As we start to move in that transition into renewables, more wind farms, more offshore installations, we're going to see more and more activity around this. The North Sea will become more strategically important as energy security and Arctic competition intensify. The North Sea may be in what we perceive as decline in relation to hydrocarbons. It will be increased activity because of the presence in the Arctic and our whole transition to renewables. That will be the next key challenge for us. The key challenge is, don't make the mistakes we made in oil and gas in renewables. Hostile activity will remain deniable. Who do we blame? Who do we blame for drones? We might think we know who it is, but how do we prove it without the evidence? And it's all about testing that response, testing how we respond as an industry, as individuals, and as a nation, rather than triggering conflict. If Russia wanted to destroy a platform, they'd destroy it. but it would lead to conventional response, so they stay below it. You're going to face more disruption, more reporting demands, and more close call events. It's definitely going to happen. It's going to happen more and more. They will push more and more. The more efficient we become at it, the harder they will push, the more that they will do. Okay? Think of things like data poisoning. Imagine your data that's captured offshore, while it's traveling onshore, somebody intercepts it and changes it just a little bit, so that when it hits onshore and feeds into your supply chain, within 6 months, 30 companies in your supply chain have poisoned data. The economic impact is astronomical. That's hybrid warfare. What you can do, preparedness, coordination, and resilience will matter more than ever. We need to be more organized. The closing message to you all is the North Sea is genuinely now more contested and strategically important than it ever has been. A lot of Aberdeen, a lot of the industry sees it as a declining issue. It's not. From a security and military perspective, it's becoming more and more critically important to national security. Most operators will first encounter this through unusual marine behavior, not headline level attack. So how many of the incidents around drones, around suspicious vessels actually hit the news? A tiny amount. The reason that is because we try and control the media space to avoid creating panic. Government's got a duty of care so that they don't create a culture of fear, that people don't think Russia's invading us because there's a Russian warship sailing through the English Channel. The biggest practical risks to you are disruption, confusion, close call events, and pressure on routine operations. That pressure will naturally bring mistakes. If you've got anyone who's been dealing with an issue with a drone offshore, it's a massively stressful, high-pressure situation for a drone that maybe costs 150 quid. It can cause massive disruption, huge ripples throughout your organization. The best defense you have, strong awareness, be disciplined about reporting, and coordinate response. And then finally, the task for us all is to stay alert, stay factual, stay operationally calm. Don't listen to all the information that's out there because the information space is being poisoned. Keep it real, that you understand, that your people understand the threat, and stay alert to it. We've got thousands of sets of eyes and ears in the North Sea. We don't use them nearly enough because we don't tell them about what this threat is. They can't give us the evidence and information if we aren't telling them what to look for. Biggest responsibility you have is to make sure that your workforces and people in your organization understand the unconventional nature of what they're facing. And that's me, folks. Any questions? Thanks.
Oh, no,
Got a question here?
I'm hoping there'll be more than one question. We're running a bit ahead. That's fine. There you go.
Yeah, hello, my name is Sig Vermundsen. I'm representing Global Maritime here today. I noticed that you mainly focused on oil and gas. We are also moving into renewables today, which also faces a lot of these challenges. What we have seen as marine consultancy challenges for these hybrid warfare and threats is spoofing of PRSs for DP operations, which not necessarily is limited to the North Sea. We have huge challenges elsewhere in the world, but what we as consultancies struggles with is guidance to give to a vessel which are in trouble because someone jams our GPS signals. It's all fine because we have redundancy, we have other sources to rely on, but it's still a threat. Where is the guidance? Who do we tell? And what guidance do we do when we are in these situations? Because we have seen them.
I think that's a broader question for the industry, and that's what too much information around this has been siloed in the organization. So the government gives limited information because it's so concerned about the culture of fear, about managing the information space. So let's be honest about the industry. So the industry gives some information, but quite often it's locked behind subscription paywalls or membership events. If you're not a member, you don't get to go, you don't get to listen. So really, the industry is aware in silos of what's going on, but there's no common standard that everyone gets access to. There's no forum like this where we all come in and understand everybody about the hybrid warfare threat. So that's an industry-related question, to look at your major trade membership bodies and say, what do we do in these situations? Because I can tell you now, the Nordic states and the Baltic states are light years ahead of us. So senior energy officials in Norway now have security clearance from the government And on a weekly basis, they receive classified intelligence briefs on the threats from Russia and China so that they can better understand and interpret the risks to energy. Because Norway realizes that its energy industry, not oil and gas, the whole energy industry is pivotal to that country's stability and control and security. So it's a great question. That's why I said before, the mistakes we've made in oil and gas, we can't afford to make them in the transition to renewables. We are making them, okay? We're making them now, I can tell you now. We're making the mistakes. At some point, as an industry, we've got to come together and say, stop. Okay, stop. We can't take this on our own. We need to be better informed and made better aware about it. So I don't have the answer for that. You know, because it's regionalized. Norway do it differently. The Baltic states have things like Baltic Sentry. Any available naval vessel in the Baltic states that isn't on operational duties is put into energy fields as security. We don't have that luxury. So it's very regionalized at the moment, but yeah, it's something that there needs real alignment on.
Thank you. Could you pass the mic to Graham from OUK? Graham, it's one behind you.
Good morning, everyone. Graham Skinner from Offshore Energies UK. Great presentation, Rob. Thank you very much. And we're taking this very seriously, working very closely with government on all of this. And I would say, give everyone I recognise your comments, Rob, about UK being behind. But I'm pleased to say we're really seeing a rapid ramping up of the government appetite to actually catch up this year. We've worked very closely with the Department of Energy, Net Zero, and NPSA and other security agencies to publish some guidance at the beginning of the year for OIMs around suspicious activity, which describes how to do the reporting that you touched on, Rob. And that is available. It's let's say it's slightly restricted, so directly for energy companies, security personnel, and then they can take that guidance into their own operations. But we also expect offshore energy operators to be engaging with vessel operators that are coming in and out of the field. You're going to be an extra set of eyes, extra radar, and it's really important that if anything seems out of place at all, that you report it to the installation, who then can pass it on to the relevant services. What we're seeing is very, very infrequent incidents, but we need to be able to develop a really good situational awareness. And the people that are out in the middle of the North Sea are the ones who are best placed to spot if something looks out of place.
Thanks, Graham. Any more questions for Rob while we've got him on the stage? One.
Thank you. Very good presentation, and it highlights the need for disciplined reporting, as you identified. But to whom do we report?
Yeah, again, that's something that the industry has to sort of address. So we're lucky in this country. We've got NATO's Maritime response cell at Northwood that has a set number that you can call around this. So depending on the nature of the incident, really depends on what you have to do. So that's why the processes are so important. You have to have a process that you can run through to look at the necessary steps of escalation. So a vessel sighted at a certain distance with its AIS turned off, yeah, that's something to monitor and report on. A drone flying close to a platform clearly hits a different threshold for response. But this is out there. These numbers are out there. This information is out there. It's just the fact that a lot, and I do take on board what Graham says, but a lot of the time is that information isn't released to the entire industry as a whole. Think about these, low-level operators or service companies that are putting 2 or 3 people offshore, who are maybe 5 people in the company, whose people see something and have no idea how to respond. So I'm only here for a couple of days. Should I really bring this up? How do I bring it up? I don't want to be scaremongering. I don't want to create this culture of panic and fear. So you're absolutely right. But I can tell you now that it has to go to report it so we can coordinate it and understanding it. It has to go to the highest levels. So yeah, Maritime headquarters, ring them. If you ring Police Scotland and Aberdeen, realistically, what's their understanding, what they're going to do at the time? They'll probably take a note of it, but it will slow the process down. So there are set numbers that you can access, that you can ring in, you can speak to duty watch keepers, and they may not have a resolution, they may simply take a record of it, but they start to build up a broader picture of minor events, because all the minors will eventually lead to a major, because it's how much our adversaries can penetrate and test to see the response. And at the moment, what they're thinking is, we can do more and more because there's not a cohesive response to what happens. And then it's the whole information space piece. Somebody sees it, how many times you see somebody see something, it's on Facebook, or it hits Instagram, or it hits something else? How do we manage that whole space? Or our adversaries put it on there for other people to see? So yeah, again, it's the thing where the industry as a whole needs that coordination of everybody knows it's publicly available, free of charge for everyone. How do we escalate these incidents, and who do we escalate them to? We don't have that at the moment. I know it doesn't answer the question of who to, but ultimately, yeah, if it was me and something was happening like that, if I rang Police Scotland and they say thanks very much, I'd be ringing the NATO number and I'd be saying I'd like to report a suspicious incident offshore. That's what they're there for. That's why it was set up at the time.
As professional HSEQ superintendents and managers and everyone represented here in the building, when we do identify a suspicious activity, we need to report it, but it's important that we report it to the right person or right party. So can you share, when you get the information, can you share with the MSF so that we can then use that details for reporting?
Yeah, I can happily give you, no problems at all, of all the contact numbers that you need and who you need to contact, and even help you with that decision-making process. So how do we make decisions? How do we get there? Because it's dynamic. So you guarantee if you look offshore at your ERPs and suddenly looking for a response to one, you may not find it. You may look and look and look and say it's not there. And someone else checks it and says it's not there. It's definitely not there. How do you dynamically then assess that, assess the threat and the risk so that you know where to respond to? So I can certainly pass on those numbers and a brief guide of how you should be looking to escalate it. The important thing for escalating is it's got to be evidence-based. We don't want that knee-jerk reaction where we create a culture of panic. We want to go to an organization to say, I have gone through 3 steps here and it has reached a threshold where we believe it needs to be escalated. That's easy to do. We can do that for you tomorrow. No problems at all.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Any final questions for Rob? Oh, one of it, Malcolm.
That's why I stopped it.
Hi there, Malcolm Mackay from Brodie's and also MSF Steering Group. It was just to really echo what the gentleman over there said in relation to who do we report to. And what I'm mindful of is that I've heard similar things, albeit not recently, not just from the energy sector, but from other marine businesses. So, for example, from the ferries and also from the fishing sector. So I think, whilst I appreciate you're going to share the information, I think there's a wider sort of information sharing, albeit, as you said, not accidentally creating a sort of paranoid, hysterical reaction. So I was just really wanting to flag that. I think it goes beyond just, as Graham said, the OEUK response via, say, operators of or OEMs on rigs, but perhaps a wider sort of information and sort of marine awareness of this and just basically passing this information on so it's dealt with properly. Thanks. And good presentation. Thanks very much.
Yeah, just so for us as a company, and my MD's here, and I'm just looking for a little smirk for him to say yes, we'll pass that information out, okay? We'll put it out to anybody that wants it. If you want information, get in touch with me afterwards. I'll make sure that you have that information of who to contact and a brief process that you can adopt in how you start to look at escalate things, and then you can develop that to a process. The more we get it out there, we create a safer environment for us all. I'd shout it from the rooftops if I could, if everyone would listen. Because for me, it's not about, the threat is so high now, it's so significant, the industry's got to catch up. If we don't catch up, we're going to keep getting caught out. So I'll happily pass that on to any other industry that needs it.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.